Welcome back, Honors. Welcome back to your flip classroom in our last discussion about ancient Rome. Actually, that's not completely true. We will talk about ancient Rome a little bit going into the next unit and stuff like that. We're actually talk about the fall of Rome and its relation to the Middle Ages, but right now we're going to actually kind of wrap up the Pax Romana period, okay? Now, we left off in class talking about a lot of really important stuff, okay? And I know some of y'all are like, wow, Mr. Terry, way to post this flip all last minute and whatnot. Look, it's only going to be 8 minutes long. I'm recording it right now at 6:30 in the morning. As you can see, it's still dark outside. And also, sorry, but I had to watch the Eagles yesterday because, go Birds.
Eagles won the Super Bowl.
I know that's how the Eagles won but this isn't the Eagles.
Go Birds, though.
Oh, go Birds.
All right, fine. Go Birds, right?
I know go Birds. Get your hand off my knee.
Go Birds.
Go Birds. Go Birds.
Go Birds! Okay.
Exactly, right? So looking at this entire thing that we left off in class, okay, talking about how not all of the emperors, right, were a lot, actually, I was about to say a lot like Augustus, but when we're really looking at it, do we want to be completely like Augustus? The guy literally had a third of the Senate killed. But the biggest thing about it, though, that we did leave off talking about, is that some of these emperors are going to be pretty gnarly, right? Some of these emperors are going to be pretty, intense, and we left off talking about the mad emperor Caligula, right? We talked a little bit about Caligula. We talked about his name, origin of his name, right? In fact, it means little boots. We talked about how he loved to see people sawed in half before meals, apparently. Another pretty famous story about Caligula as well is apparently he had a bunch of senators over to his house for a meal over onto Palatine Hill and the really, really big hill in Rome that's next to the Forum. That is the origin of the word palace because there was actually a palace for the emperors built on top of it. So the biggest thing about it, though, is he apparently had a bunch of senators actually there for a dinner, and he apparently broke out into this huge fit of laughter, then just following it up with, "Oh my God, I could kill all of you right now and nothing would happen to me." And so the thing about it, though, is that Caligula was a good example of somebody that's really, really intense in that manner, right? Somebody that's violent and aggressive and really over the top. And also what's going to end up happening to him is after he tries to make his horse a consul, and also one time he tried to pretend he could walk on water by riding his horse over a bunch of pontoon boats and stuff like that. He's ridiculous, but he does end up getting stabbed to death by his own Praetorian guards, right? Now, another really, really famous one is this guy, and everybody knows this dude. My wife knows this guy. My mom knows this guy. This man is Nero, right? Nero. The Emperor Nero is one of the last Julio-Claudian, emperors, and he is going to be famous and very infamous for a lot of different reasons, right? So when we're looking at it, first and foremost, apparently he killed his mom. Apparently there was this, huge, huge rivalry between Nero and his mom. And the thing about it, apparently, is she tried to kill him a couple of times, and he tried to kill her back a couple of times. And her name was Agrippina. And what ended up happening, actually, in the long run, is apparently after a failed boat incident where he created a boat to put her on that would collapse in on itself and then sink. It didn't really work out, and then he was really just standing on the edge of the water, freaking out because his mom didn't die. He apparently kicked her to death after pushing her down a flight of stairs. But Nero is very, very famous for being the emperor that apparently played fiddle while Rome burned, right? Or played the fiddle while Rome burned. Now, first and foremost, fiddles didn't exist. All right, so fiddles didn't exist. That's actually another name for a violin, right? Now, the thing about it, though, that it does relate to Nero, though, is that apparently Nero was very, very into music, right? He loved music and the arts and poetry and reading and things like that. Now, looking at it, though, he wouldn't have played a fiddle. He would have played what's called a lyre, which is a little harp or something like that. But the thing about it, though, that it does actually relate to, the historical event that it relates to the Great Fire of Rome that actually happened underneath his reign. And when the Great Fire of Rome actually broke out, another thing about it is the saying, "Oh, he played the fiddle while Rome burned," is supposed to make it look like he nonchalantly, just watches Rome burn while he's playing his lyre and stuff like that. Not actually true, right? He actually sent a lot of money and a lot of troops and a lot of things back to Rome to try and put the fire out. But the biggest thing about it is actually closer to who did he blame the fire on? And he blamed it on the Christians. So at the time, by this point in history, when Nero was actually in power, something you need to understand is that Christ had already been born, died, crucified, resurrected, and the faith had already began, right? Christianity had already started by this point, but Christianity was heavily illegal in the Roman Empire by this point. And so the thing about it is because it went against Roman, polytheism. So getting into it, though, he blames it on the Christians because it actually started in the cloth district where a lot of them that actually had stalls were selling goods and hiding out. So he actually blames it on them and actually then proceeds to have hundreds of Christians executed. He actually famously would actually literally have plays put on, and if a character in the play died, he would replace the actor with a Christian that had their mouth actually covered and stuff, and then actually kill them live on stage, right? And then another big one as well is where the actual fire of Rome happened. He had a massive garden built there. Just for himself, though, where he loved to go out, hang out, play his lyre, and read and stuff like that. Well, what happened though is that apparently he really liked to actually read at night, and so he would, according to according to what some of the Romans said, he would literally like have Christians tied to sticks and then padded around with hay, and then he'd have them set on fire, and he'd read next to the light that they produced, right? So the thing about it, though, is that Nero does manage to make a lot of people upset, and then his own military decides to kill him, right? And what they actually do is they force him to dig his own grave, they throw a knife down there, and he shoves it into his neck on his own, and he kills himself, right? Now, going into it, though, those are just two good examples of, like, pretty insane Roman emperors. There's a bunch of other ones, like Domitian. There's this guy named Commodus, who's actually the son of one of the 5 good emperors we're about to talk about in here about 2 seconds. He was known as the Gladiator Emperor, and this is the only surviving bust of him that we have, because apparently, literally, all of his other busts were destroyed by angry, like, Romans who, like, just didn't like him and hated his guts and stuff. And so the thing about it is like, that's the only surviving one, because what happens to stuff whenever, remember Khufu in Egypt and stuff like that? Don't make people upset, and then they won't actually, like, you know, destroy your effigies and stuff like that. But Commodus apparently was known as the Gladiator Emperor because he apparently, like, stabbed sleeping lions to death and stuff like that in the Colosseum in front of everybody, and just demanded that they cheer for him. So big thing about it, though, that's Elagabalus. This right here is Caracalla. Caracalla is another pretty famous one that had large villages of people executed, and he was actually famously known for the emperor that got stabbed in the back while he was peeing on the side of the road, right? Like, so now look, big thing about it, though, in general, is there were a lot of really crazy emperors, but the thing about it is the Pax Romana comes to a climactic end with 5 good ones all in a row, okay? So these are literally, this is known as the 5 good emperors of the Pax Romana. Now, the 2 that you're going to need to know for your test are actually, like, in all capital letters right there, okay? The other 3 are important just because knowing them is actually important for the rest of your existence, and also knowing that there was the period of 5 good emperors that wrapped up the Pax Romana period in Rome is just really important, right? And so the 5 good emperors relate to Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Pius, and Marcus Aurelius, okay? Nerva, okay, he comes into power following the pretty intense rules underneath the Flavian dynasty after, like, emperors like Vespasian and Domitian and Trajan. But the thing, or not Trajan, actually, like, that's a different one. So, like, after, like, Vespasian and Domitian, but Nerva comes in, and basically all he does is he just doesn't screw up, right? Like, Nerva comes in immediately, and he actually brings, like, some, like, kind of, like, sensible peace to the empire by preventing any kind of chaotic or intense, like, political, like, chaos, or actually, you know, from, like, you know, dying of a crazy being stabbed to death incident. So Nerva comes in, just doesn't mess anything up, right? Trajan, though, comes in, and he actually expands Rome to the largest that it ever was, right? Land acquisition-wise, Trajan got into the biggest land acquiesced point that, like, Rome had ever seen. And he actually had a very famous column actually built after it, literally to try and commemorate the growth of the empire underneath his entire reign. Now, interestingly enough, one of the other guys on this list named Marcus Aurelius actually had his own column built just a little bit bigger than Trajan's after he took over the Germanics and stuff like that. But that column actually sits in Rome to this day and celebrates the fact that Trajan brought Rome to its absolute biggest height. Hadrian is another one, though. After Trajan brings Rome to its biggest height, Hadrian actually organizes the bureaucracy, and he builds a massive wall, right? He builds a huge wall known as Hadrian's Wall. And Hadrian's Wall cuts through the middle of Britain because, y'all, that's how far Rome expanded, right? From Italy all the way to what is now midway point through modern-day England. And Hadrian built a huge wall up there, and he also built, like, parts of the wall in the east as well to try and basically, like, set a limit on how large Rome would grow. Because Rome was getting a lot like a house of cards, right? The bigger and bigger it got, the more and more unstable it was getting. So by building a physical wall that would actually restrain its growth a little bit, Hadrian actually helped keep Rome from collapsing for several hundred more years. Pius is another one that comes in, and apparently he brought peace to the Roman Empire as well, because there was just no periods of war underneath him. But last but very not least, after knowing Hadrian, you need to know Marcus Aurelius, right? Marcus Aurelius is also known as the Roman philosopher king, okay? He was a Stoic philosopher, and he believed that his job as emperor was to benefit the people, right? Now, Marcus Aurelius came in, and he did actually have a small amount of war. He actually took over the Germanic tribes over in the eastern area of the Roman Empire, brought them underneath his, like, control. But the big thing about Marcus Aurelius is he literally believed, just like many of the other Stoics, that if you have a garden and a library, that's all you will ever need in this world. And Marcus Aurelius believed that his job was to make sure that the Roman people lived the best version of their life that they possibly could. And so he's known as one of the best emperors that Rome ever saw. There's a very famous picture of him actually sitting, or not a picture of him, a sculpture of him sitting on top of Capitoline Hill on a horse, pointing off into the distance. Very, very big bronze statue. I absolutely love it. But Marcus Aurelius is super important, and we'll talk about him a little bit as well during the review. Now, going into it, though, just so you know, this is wrapping up your entire unit on Rome, because it doesn't matter how many good Roman emperors there are, the fall is coming, right? But we'll talk about that after exams. And I'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good one.